Thank you, Megan, and it's a pleasure to be here tonight. When we started the Canadian cow-calf Cost of Production Network, we were really focused on creating benchmarks across different production systems, recognizing that there's a lot of variety across the country, but there's also even variety within a single province. When you think of Ontario, whether you're up in the Northwest or down in the Golden Horseshoe or way, way down in the South, things look different of what producers are facing in terms of environmental conditions and limitations. But we also wanted to create a platform for producers to learn from each other and share ideas on how to implement practices. And therefore, the goal wasn't just benchmarking, but also looking into the future and asking how innovation and management change would impact financial performance. And I'm going to really focus on the benchmark side of things, and John's going to talk more about the scenarios that have been run. But I mentioned benchmarks, and some of us think about benchmarks differently. You may be familiar with a provincial average that's out there, and this is really important in terms of, how do you compare to the competitive environment that you operate in. Or you may do annual benchmarking, in January each year, where you run your numbers and you compare how did things perform this year versus last year. The network is really focused on sort of this middle piece of saying, what are my peers who are in a similar production system doing? Those who face the same environmental conditions, who, calve at the same time, wean at the same time, having a sort of smaller cohort to compare against. So after 3 years of data collection, we right now have 59 benchmark farms across Canada with over 225 participating producers, and 6 of those benchmarks are located in Ontario. But when we look at our network, our results are really presented in terms of cash costs, which is no surprise. It's almost 60% of total costs for the cow-calf enterprise. But we don't want to forget about other things, specifically depreciation. And we talk about cash and depreciation together being what's needed to cover your medium-term cost structure, because depreciation is what allows you to replace your assets, whether that's machinery assets or it's cows if you have to rebuild after a drought. And this really shows the viability of the operation to continue operating. But we don't want to forget opportunity costs. And this is about having a market value return on investment to your land, labor, and capital. And asking that question of what are you putting in? And if it's unpaid labor, that can be a choice. But also, what does that represent in terms of return from the operation? On the right-hand side, the chart shows that of your variable costs, feed is the biggest one, and we're going to come back to that because it's probably of most interest to producers here. But when we look at our 22 final results, we don't have 23 numbers yet. We're going to wait for 23 data to be final, and then those will be coming out later this year. But on all these charts, what you're going to see is anything in a blue bar is from Manitoba West. Anything in an orange bar is basically Ontario East. And what this shows you is that whether you're looking at cash costs or total costs, you've got low cost producers, high cost producers, and everything in between. And that sort of middle majority, which is where the box is, has your majority averaging about $950 on your cash costs and just over $1,600 on your total costs. And you need to recognize that we have a whole variety of sizes within the network. And so on the left-hand side, you can see that, yes, we've got a couple of benchmarks that are larger, 950, but the vast majority of our network is less than 400 head, and a significant portion are even less than 100 head. And we go right down into that 15 to 30 head herd size. But one of the questions is, can you be profitable as a small operation? And the reality is, on the right-hand side, you absolutely can be. So in that first grouping of bars of less than 100 head, The ones on the very far left, which is an Ontario 2 farm and a couple of maritime farms, they actually have total cost structures comparable to some of those that are over 300 head. And this is one where it's important to focus on getting better before you get bigger and scale up, because whatever you're scaling, whether it's mediocre or good profitability, is what you're scaling up and getting the advantage on. But it's definitely possible to be a very competitive cost structure in a small operation. So one of the questions that we've been asked in the last couple of years with the network is revenue keeping up with cost inflation? Because we know costs are going up. And again, that 22 data showing cash costs up 10%, depreciation up 11, opportunity costs up 6. These do add up, but you can see there that revenue was up more than that, supporting profitability in 2022. And with record high prices in 2023, we are preliminarily estimating that all of the benchmark farms will be able to cover cash costs last year, and over 90% would be able to cover cash and depreciation, with over 60% also covering their opportunity costs, representing a significant improvement in overall profitability of cow-calf operations across the country since that low that was made back in 21 with drought. So this is medium-term costs for the entire network across Canada. So this is covering cash and depreciation. And it really shows that variety. And a couple of things here. I want you to not be discouraged about the fact that we do have some farms that are in the red on this chart. Some of these actually do have whole farm profitability, and they have multiple revenue sources, and it's part of their risk management plan, recognizing that not all their enterprises are going to be profitable at the same time. But what I want you to take away from this is that it is possible to make incremental changes to improve competitiveness and profitability, and that it is absolutely possible to be profitable in the cow-calf sector across Canada. And one of the things that top third of operations are doing is controlling costs. And it's really difficult to do this when we're talking about inflation of costs, but it's during these times when there is inflationary costs that having an eye on them and controlling them is so critical, because it makes a long-term impact. But in general, the top third of the benchmarks had cash costs that were 23% lower than the bottom 2/3. And I mentioned that, that middle majority, they had cash costs of about $950 per cow. This top third is at just over 800. And so those are just two numbers to think about when you're thinking about what are you aiming for. The next one is depreciation, and those top third operations were 33% lower than the bottom 2/3 at around $140 per cow. And then opportunity costs were 25% lower, just under $400 per cow. And the point here is that these top third operations, they're not just focusing on one thing. They're not just obsessed with cash costs or obsessed with decreasing their overhead and depreciation costs. They are controlling costs in every aspect of their operation. And overall, it adds up to their total cost being 25% lower at around that $1,350 per cow compared to the overall average of $1,640. But we also need to remember that we operate in a North American market. And Nebraska has a state program looking at cost of production, and they were projecting their 2023 costs to be equivalent to about $1,750 per cow Canadian. And we need to remember that we do have a competitive cow-calf sector, and we want to keep it resilient. So we pulled out and are looking at just a few of the provinces just so that you can see these graphs a wee bit easier. But this is taking everything from Manitoba east. And we have a lot of different winter feedstuffs that can be used, but you can see here that you can be high cost or low cost with any winter feedstuff. And hay is the most common winter feedstuff from coast to coast and is found in a lot of different rations and combinations with other feedstuffs. And when you look at the medium-term profitability, you can see that there's no silver bullet in terms of picking the best feedstuff. A whole pile of this comes down to management and the fact that you can take what you have and use the resources on hand. And it's the management that makes the biggest difference in the bottom line. And then just looking at feed costs in general, for the East, feed costs averaged $640 per cow in 2022, up about 14% from 21. And we continue to see feed costs across North America be pressured. But in the last 10 months, we have seen some prices come down depending on the feedstuff used. And when we look at the approximate feed costs, and this is your homegrown hay cost of production, or if you purchase feed, it was averaging about $13 per head per day, with a really wide range from about $2 to over $4. I did want to narrow things down even more for you. And so this is just looking at Manitoba, Ontario, and the Maritimes. And we again took those benchmark farms and divided them into thirds for your low, medium, and high profitable groups. Part of the reason I wanted to do this is because these provinces showed some trends that were unique and different than the national trends. And specifically, you can see there that total cost structures for the medium and high profitable farms were actually similar. But where the difference came in was in the revenue, where the high profitable farms had slightly higher revenue. Nationally, when we looked at this, we actually didn't see any difference in revenue across those different groups. But what we do see with these high profitable farms is not necessarily higher revenue on weaned calves, but also considering all revenue sources, such as their cull cow revenue and breeding revenue in terms of if they're selling breeding stock. So we have a lot of resources on our website. You can go to canfax.ca, and at the top under resources, you're going to find a general cost of production page, as well as a results page with summaries, as you can see there in the table, of all of the different farms, and along with future farm scenarios that John's going to talk about next. So with that, I would like to thank our funder, the BCRC, who makes the network possible, along with all of our provincial partners who we couldn't do this program without. So I think I'm handing it right over to John so that he can follow up with the next part of the presentation, which is going to be focused more on Ontario. John?
Right, yep, thank you. I'll be taking over now. So just working to share my screen here. Okay, I'll assume that everybody's hearing me okay and seeing the slides here. So I just wanted to spend a little bit of time on the Ontario farm, just to give you a bit of a sense of what they look like, and drill down a little bit into some of the results of them as well. So we'll just spend a little bit of time looking at those. So the Ontario farm, so we had 25 farms participate in the focus groups. So these were focus groups that helped put together, and these are typical farm scenarios. So we're putting together production systems and a typical farm model. So each of those farms were part of one of these focus groups to build these typical farm scenarios. The size range from 50 head to 160 head. For them in that 50 to 60 cow range, then one at 100 and one at 160. We had one that does two calvings, a spring and a fall calving, but the rest of them were spring calvers, and three of them were just selling calves, but only then keeping replacements, so they weren't finishing further. But then there was one farm there that did some preconditioning of calves, one that was backgrounding, and then another one that was finishing them to market weight, as well as selling some purebred bulls. So we did have a purebred operation, or at least part of their operation was in purebreds as well. So, and then the days on winter feed range from 165 to 212, so quite a range in there. So lots of different production systems, and like Brenda said, that was the intent, is to try to come up with different production systems, put the farms that participating into similar groups so that they could come together and talk about what that typical farm may look like and put that production system together. The as you saw in some of the feed cost slides, a lot of folks were using hay, and that was true in Ontario as well. 5 of them were using hay as at least part of their rations, but then the other parts were a little different again. So again, it was that difference between some of the, you know, some were using oatlage, some were using oats and pea baleage, and some were using corn silage. And there was a couple. Ontario one was buying some in byproducts, so corn screenings. And then Ontario two was bringing in corn distillers into the operation. So again, differences in the production systems, and that was what. And as we look through some of the results, you do start seeing some of the differences that come out of these typical farms. But that was the intent, to come up with different production systems and look at some of the differences that are between them, and come up with some typical farm scenarios so that we've got, sort of these production systems mapped out on an income and expense basis. So this is the results of just the Ontario farms. So the 6 Ontario farms, and as Brenda was talking about, there's the 3 different cost categories: cash, depreciation, and then opportunity cost. So you see the chart on the left then shows just where, the orange bar is the calf sales plus breeding if they're selling some breeding stock, and cull sales. So that is their total cow-calf revenue. And then the dot would be just the calf sales piece of it. So you see that most of them were covering cash costs and depreciation. Some were having a little bit of a struggle with on that side of things, but nobody was covering those opportunity costs. And you see the opportunity costs on the right-hand side. The orange bar, the biggest one, is the labor piece, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit, as sort of where some of that labor comes from. But those opportunity costs also tend to be fairly individual. It's sort of, what are your expectations for your return to labor and your return to your land and return to the equity on your capital. So it can tend to be individual. So that's why when we look at profitable farms, we look a little bit more at the medium term profits, which is covering those cash and depreciation, where you see the majority of the farms, even in Ontario, had the ability to cover those. And I will say as well that the fact that they're not covering opportunity costs is not unique to beef, cow, calf. I've done a number of different studies and different calculations on different industries, and when we start adding opportunity costs, return on land and return on unpaid labor, there's a lot of commodities that have difficulty covering the full opportunity costs, right? And every year. So it's, you may have some years where you've got a higher return to your labor than others, just because of the fluctuations in the commodities. That's not unique to the cow-calf enterprise, and I just wanted to highlight that. So as far as the Ontario cost, you see $17.90 per cow for total COP. The cash costs were just a little bit over 1,000, which I believe the overall was just a little bit over. I think, but 900 or so, or cash costs in that range for the overall. So I'll give you a little bit higher costs on the Ontario side for the cash piece, and then the depreciation was $200 a cow. So Ontario cash plus depreciation cost was in that $1,200 cow range, just to give you a bit of a sense on that side of things. But there was on Ontario Farms, Ontario 2 was the one that had cash costs that were in that 800 cow per cow range that we saw some of the more profitable farms and some of the Western farms were able to achieve those. So there, there you there were farms within the Ontario ones that had that ability and had the, um, had were able to cover those cash costs and compete with some of the cow-calf herds in other provinces as well. So we just wanted to highlight those. And so this is out of actually, there's an excellent fact sheet that Canfax put together on, looking at farms that achieved feed costs, winter feed costs below 700. And so this was the Eastern breakdown. But I would encourage you to have a look at that fact sheet on their website because it's a good read on sort of the differences across the provinces and differences within some of the different production systems. So Ontario East, the Eastern farms, there was 19 farms, and this is 12 of them, so it's just a selection of them. And if we think, the top third of that would be about 6 farms. So if we look at these 6 farms to the left of the graph, these farms were able to achieve winter feed costs of less than 500. So this would be the top farms as far as winter feed cost control. So just another one of those numbers that you kind of keep in mind for yourselves as far as um, you know things to think about as far as where you are in your feed costs in comparison to some of these top farms as far as their feed cost control. There's 3 Ontario farms in here that you can see, and you know similar to what Brenna was saying, there isn't one way that works for everybody, right? So if you remember Ontario 2 and Ontario 1 were buying in feedstock, so they had fairly higher than some of the others in the purchase feed, and but they were controlling other ones. Like Ontario 1 was doing a pretty good job of controlling their machinery costs on their farm. They had high production input, like seed, fertilizer, pesticides were high for that, but they did a fairly decent job of controlling their machinery costs. Where Ontario 2 didn't have as much on the production input side of things and, you know, did okay on the machinery side of things. So there was, differences across the farms that they were doing different things, but they were achieving, competitive results. So it's not, you know, one one size fits all, and that's good and bad. Like I know I've been asked this question as well. So there's no one thing that we can do. Well, you know, there's there's bad in that saying, well, we can't point to one thing and say do this, but it's good in the fact that we can't say, the only way you can make money in the cow business is to be in southern Saskatchewan with a 300 head herd and feeding, extensive grazing and bale grazing. So there are opportunities anywhere to and within, different production systems to be competitive in the cow calf industry. This is the one I just wanted to highlight as far as the labor hours. This is the one, the orange bar would have been that opportunity cost that we saw in the previous slide, and just wanted to highlight the differences here. And, a lot of it is the orange bars, which is just, an estimate on the producer's side of how much labor they have on farm. So it is a non-cash piece, but it's just to be mindful of just how much labor am I using on my operation? What is the return for my labor, as well as the blue bar, which is the cash labor. So you see, like Ontario 1 and Ontario 3 and Ontario 6 were similar sized farms. Like they had, 50 to 59 cows, but big differences in the amount of labor hours they estimated it took for them to manage that cow herd. So, some of that could be tracking, but it's just be mindful of, you know, having a, setting up some kind of a record or tracking system to get a good sense of just how much labor does my cow calf operation take for me. Because, on the opportunity cost side, it was a big factor in some of the numbers we're seeing on the total cost. That's just be a be mindful of it and do a good job of tracking it to see where you are for your operation. So the last piece I wanted to talk about was just on the future farm scenario. So this was, Brandon sort of mentioned it a little bit, but what, beyond the benchmarks, one of the great things that has come out of the Canfax's research is on this future farm scenario. So each of the focus groups was asked, okay, if you could change one, two, three things on your operation that you hope will increase profitability, what would they be? And if you did change them, what would be some of the things you need to be thinking about? What are some of the things that could be trade-offs in that, or things that you need to be mindful of? And that's what these future farm scenarios are. So and not surprisingly, the ideas fell into the three main buckets as far as cost control, increasing profitability, doing a better job of marketing. So a lot of I think there's like 70 plus future farm scenarios that were put together. And I would encourage you to look at all of them across, not there are the Ontario ones, of course, but all of the different ones across the country, you can see what the considerations were and what the trade-offs were. And then you can just see whether there's, different scenarios, different things that might be applicable to you, and you can see from a perspective of what the potential impact could be, because these are really a starting point because they are based on assumptions. I mean, the assumptions were informed by literature reviews and talking with industry experts of what things do you need to consider when you're changing to corn grazing or corn stover grazing, or increasing your cow or your cow culling rate. Those things, did a good job of mapping out the assumptions of each one of those, so you can have a look at those. The double cropping for Ontario ones, double cropping fall rye into wheat to do some, extended grazing from that standpoint. So each of the farms picked different ones, and then the Canfax went through and did the work on there. So this was just Ontario 2 as an example, just kind of they walk through what would be the potential net benefit over a 5-year span, because some of these take time to build and implement. So it just gives you an idea of what are some of what were the net benefits. So the bottom line is on the top, actually, the net benefits. But then it just talks about, is that initial cost high or low or medium, and what are some of the benefits? So you see here the rotational grazing had some of the higher net benefits, but it also had the higher initial costs. So there's some cost outlay that you've got to put out there, and then and then just maps out some of the benefits. So it maps out what are some of the trade-offs, what are some of the considerations, and then you can have a look at your numbers and see how it might be different, or how things could change for your operation. But it gives you a bit of a thought process for you to start to think about some of these. And like I say, there's 70 plus different kind of scenarios. So lots of things to choose from, and lots of number crunching that has already happened to look at some of these scenarios that may have a positive impact on your profitability. So that's all I had. And so, and if you do have questions for Brenna and I think Megan had mentioned, we will then take them at the end when we open it up for Q&A. But what we want to do now is we want to introduce our panel of producers here. All of these producers were part of the Cost of Production Network. So we're going to give them an opportunity to give a little bit of a profile of their operation, and then we're going to have a bit of a panel discussion, asking them some questions, and then after that we'll open it up to questions where you can ask your individual questions. So I will just introduce the speakers as we go through these, and then they'll give you a little bit of a presentation on their operation, you can get a sense of who they are and what they farm. So the first one is Mike Buis. So Mike and Joanne Buis, along with their daughter Teresa and her husband Thomas, farm near Chatham. They have a cow-calf herd, and along with a cash cropping operation, and they market their beef through a retail outlet on their farm, and they also have a couple of other enterprises that are connected with, or at least housed on the farm, a feed company and an equine boarding, training, and riding lessons business. So I'll hand it over to Mike, and he can give more details on a profile of his operation. So welcome, Mike, and thanks for joining. Mike, I can see your screen, but I don't hear you, so I don't know if you're on mute or
I
you're trying.
can you hear me now?
I can, yes, yep.
Okay, let me turn on my video there too. There we are. Okay, good. All right, thanks, John. I'll walk you through a little bit about what we do, and as John mentioned, we're extremely diversified and a very unique business that we run down here. So I'll kind of walk you through what we do, and then we'll get to it. So let's see if I can move this forward here. There we go. So we're, as John mentioned, we're an innovative farming. We run with 4 generations. So myself, my wife, my daughter, and her husband. We have several vertically integrated businesses. So our team consists of ourselves plus 8 or 10 full and part-time staff. So there's a lot of people around here. As John mentioned, we have a feed company on farm. So we sell a variety of feeds as one of our enterprises. We also have an equine business that operates alongside of us with a number of other things happening. The gist of the operation is our cash cropping and beef production. So our cash cropping division, we're doing about 1,200 acres now with a number of different crops. We do a fair bit of double cropping where we can fit it in. We have some permanent pasture, and we custom graze some ground as well. Our cow-calf herd, we have run about 200 spring calving cows, and we've been really working the last little while on tightening up our calving times. So we're April and May calving, and we'll actually calve out on our crop ground and then pull the cows off to plant, which is kind of unique for down here. We also run a fall calving group because we need to have a supply for our store. We want to make sure we have enough cattle going through. So we run about 80 cows that calve in August and September. We utilize 10 bulls. We background and sell about 80 stockers in the spring, and so some of those go into a premium market, which is a preconditioned and reputation cattle. And then we also use that opportunity to get rid of some of the poor doers and the dogs that we have in our herd. We do, at weaning time, we take a weight, and we do weigh our calves on a regular basis, so we can pick out the ones that aren't gaining as well as they should, and we can get rid of a handful of those at that time as well. The rest of them we keep and finish. So we finish about 200 of our cattle. About 100 of them roughly go through the retail operation. And then the rest of those are sold into a value chain where we get premium on those cattle based on tenderness and a few other things. So they're chosen by ultrasound, and we can sort, but that's a whole other story for another day. Our on-farm beef sales, we sell a number right at a store we have right on our farm. Just to give you an idea where we are, we're in what I would call the Florida of Ontario. So we're way down in the southern part. So we have some great climate advantages, and we make use of all of that. And that helps us do some unique things on our farm. Also, we're in a vegetable growing area. So you heard a little bit about opportunity costs. So we're competing, growing our cattle on land that can grow tomatoes and can grow a lot of other vegetables. So the land rent in here is really an opportunity that we need to be aware of, that we can grow some things here that we have to compete with. So we have to make really good use of our land. So just a little bit on the background, we started in about 1933 with my grandfather, and we've progressed all the way through growing from a feedlot where we just finished cattle. Now that we started into the cow-calf, so we're completely vertically integrated. So our spring cows, we calve those out on corn stalks and on cover crops that we plant on all our crop ground. The fall calves, we actually grow sweet corn, so we're fortunate enough to have a spot in August and September where we can kick these cows out to calve on some crop ground and calve out there as well in the fall. We custom graze some of our cows on our neighbors' farms. We'll run cows on corn stalks to extend our grazing season from we'll get those out there we try to wait till we get the first frost in the fall, kick those cows out on there, and they'll graze right through the winter. And even we do get snow, yes. So but the cows will graze through that snow quite well and find their feed. This is a February picture, so this is kind of what it looks like today out in our fields, and you'll see that we've got some pretty good growth there. March, we like to see something like this in March, just ahead of calving. Cows are in good shape, ground's in good shape. We've got lots of growth there. We've got good, clean, green fields that we can calve out on. So we'll actually save some fields that we won't graze in the wintertime. We'll save those and put those cows out there late March, early April, so that they're ready to calve in a nice, clean spot. And we check all our cows on horseback, which is why we have the equine business that gives the use for those horses when we're not using them for checking cows. We also have 100 acres of permanent pasture that's rotational grazed. We have the creek in there is all fenced off. The pond's fenced off, and we do have a wetland in that. So we have some of our cows that will graze in the summertime on this permanent pasture. We do double crop. So this is sorghum that was planted after wheat. So this is how tall we can expect this to be 7 weeks after planting. So like I said, we need to make sure we make use of every acre we can to grow feed to run cattle. So we calve them out in this field, and then we grow crops in it as well. So this is some sorghum. We'll bale that up like that and wrap that and feed that back to the cows in the wintertime or whenever we need it. We also graze cover crops. So this is a field of rye. Cows are grazing on it and calving on it, and we'll either graze that down and then no-till into that, or else we'll, in the case of this field, we didn't get it grazed in time, so we had pretty good growth. So this was rye. We baled that up, and we're feeding that back right now. So we'll feed that into our rations now and use it to supplement feed. So the way this works is while the cows are out grazing, we offer them some feed in the bunks just to make sure we keep condition on the cows and that they have a good balanced diet. So they actually have the best of both worlds. They keep exercised while they're grazing, and then they come back up to the feed bunks where we can make sure they're getting the right balance of nutrition every day. This one, sorry the quality of the picture, but we tried something a little different. We buy in some sweet corn silage, and instead of putting plastic on top, we actually planted a cover crop on top. So it's not a very good picture, but it is rye that's growing on top of the pit, on top of the silage. And my thought behind this was, instead of using plastic, I wanted to protect the top of that pit, keep the crows out of it, and keep some spoilage from happening. So we'll see how that works out. This is my first year trying it, so we'll see how it works out. We also bring in some byproducts. So we're feeding some soybean hulls. We dabble with some other byproducts, some potatoes, carrots. Right now we're feeding brewer's grain and sweet potatoes to the cows as well. At the end of the day, this is the product we're looking for. We want to end up with some good quality beef, and that's what our goal is over the whole farm. So that's it.
Okay, thanks, Mike. And so now we'll move to the other producers, and then, like I say, we'll have them do a little bit of a profile, and then we'll open it up for a discussion here as well. So our next producer on the panel is Carl Weber, and Carl is from Webland Farms in Ayton, Grey County, and it's a multi-generational farm, and Carl is the third generation of that operation. Carl graduated from the University of Guelph with a diploma in agriculture, and soon after graduation he purchased the farm from his parents. And Carl's children, Sarah, Heather, and Eric, are the fourth generation to be actively involved in the farm, and they are formerly dairy farmers and now beef cow calf operations with also cash cropping and custom work. So welcome, Carl, and thanks for joining.
Hi, I'm Carl. I guess was said I'm from the Century Farm, and we started out as a mixed farm. My grandfather, and as time went on, my father took over, and he switched to a dairy and a laying hen operation, and we run that up until '73 when I came home, and I wanted to concentrate on the dairy side of it. So we built a silo, and our land is very rolling. So we have to grow a lot of legumes and crops to keep it covered. So we decided to start like zero grazing for the first year or two, put up a silo, and then we went from there. In 2000, I outgrew the barn, and at my age, it was too expensive to build a new barn and move on. And my son wasn't off to university yet, so we felt it wasn't a good move to do that. We went from 2000 to 2003. We were raising dairy heifers and breeding them, and I was lucky. I didn't have any around when BSE hit, but I had bought a herd of beef cows. So I don't know if that was a smart move or not, but we did it. The beef herd started out as 20 cows from a guy. Half of them were purebreds, and the other half, he was into a breeding program for the Queen's Guineas. And so we started out with them. We built the herd up to 70 plus cows. And in about 2005, or no, it's 2015, we cut back to only 35 cows. The reason we dry lot, we live close to town, and I would really love to have pastured cattle outside, but the first couple of years we had the beef cows. We couldn't figure out why calves are born and they look good, and next day they were missing. So we cut the crop next door and we found the carcasses. So we had a dry lot just to protect it. And the reason why we have so many coyotes, we're close to town, and we have a high deer population, and with a cedar swamp and a river on the property, so a good place for the coyotes, and we hear them quite often at night. So anyway, the reason why we went for cow-calf, our land is not suited for heavy cash cropping. It's a rolling gravel, and we try and keep our land covered 100% all year round. So we double crop. After the corn silage is off, we go in with rye. The rye is cut in late May, early June, and we go back into corn silage again. And because of our numbers, we have a lot of manure, so we use a lot of manure. Also, we're in an area where there's a fair few hay growers that are growing hay for horses, and we're able to buy cheaper hay that's not horse saleable. So, and that's why that's how we try and keep our costs down. We also, it's another stream of revenue for us. When our son came home, we went into raising stockers or buying stockers and taking up 900 pounds. We run 150 head of either Westerns or locals, whichever we can buy at a reasonable price. And that helps offset the cost for a smaller beef herd. When we wean our calves, we calve twice a year. We try January, February, and then in June, July. So that fits into our stream. Our 150 stockers we get in November, and they go back out in the next May. And so we got the fall calvers that are ready to go in with the cattle we bring back. And then also when we fill up in November, we have our winter calves. So it works out well for us having a double calving. We market, like I said, we market our calves back through the stockers, but because we have a registered herd of cows, we keep a few bulls back, and they get sold locally to dairy farmers that are looking for cleanup bulls, or that's quite a trend now for black Angus bulls going on Holstein cows. So we have a pretty good market where we can almost double what we can get from feeding them through the stockers side of it. Our feed also, we grow about 100 acres of oats and peas and rye, and that also gives us a cheaper source of feed for our cows. Like I said, it follows corn and the wheat. The corns, we combine between 80 and 100 acres of corn every year, and those stalks are all left till spring, chopped in the spring and baled. And our cows are on what we call bed and breakfast. Corn stalks, they can either eat it or lay on it, whichever they please. Also, by us cutting the corn stalks off, it benefits us. We're in a minimal till because of our hilly, and the only reason why we're minimum till is we have to work a manure in. When you got manure coming from over 200 head of cattle, it's a fair bit of manure to work back in. I'll keep it short, and I'll wait for questions. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Carl. And we've been working our way from the south to the north. So our last producer on the panel is Mika Gerber, and Mika grew up on a small mixed farm in northwestern Ontario. It was primarily market gardening and some beef then. In 2014, he started building his own cow-calf herd, and he and his wife Tina began buying out his dad over time. They also do some cash cropping and run a construction company farm, and they continue to grow their herd and their land base as financial resources and land availability allow. And Mika and Tina have 3 children, and they farm near Fort Francis. So welcome, Mika, and thank you for joining.
All right, thank you. Yeah, here, just give me a second. Let me pull up my, figure out how to share this screen again. There we go. All right, there we go. Is that working?
Yep, I can hear you. Yep, Kevin, you're good. Yes.
Perfect. Yeah, so as John there mentioned, my name's Mike Gerber, and yeah, farm here up in the north. Definitely not the Florida of Ontario, but still a beautiful part of the province. Yeah, so the bio was pretty clear though. We do a couple 100 acres of cash crop personally, and around 400 in a partnership as well. And yeah, we started the beef herd there in 2014 with 18 head, and now we're at around 45. And yeah, growing that as we can. We started with a Hereford-based herd and have been breeding some red Angus and black Angus into it primarily. And yeah, that's I'll just move ahead here on that. Whatever. Here's our kind of the rough location of where we're located, about 2 hours to the Manitoba border, which is kind of where we get a lot of our agricultural influence from. There's a lot of rocks and trees and lakes between us and Southern Ontario, but it's definitely an up and coming, well, has been for many years, an agricultural area, and even more so now is growing in that regard. Yeah, so the majority of our calves are marketed at our local auction mart here. We do sell a few or keep a few back for freezer beef, and but definitely primarily it's our calves we sell. Our calving season is March to April, and for now at least it's always a gamble. March can be cold or it can be beautiful, so it all depends, but this past few years haven't been too bad, more or less. And yeah, our winters, these are kind of our winter feeding strategies here. Is we used to be strictly hay. Last few years we've kind of started integrating corn into that. In the drought year of 2021 there, we didn't have enough hay, and so we chopped our corn and put in a silage pile and then grazed the pile as you can see there. And then the following winter we went to basically strictly corn grazing up until calving. And then this year we're doing kind of a hybrid corn and hay, or corn and bale grazing, I should say. And so that's kind of something we've been trying out, and it's been working out pretty good for us. this is kind of roughly our setup here for our winter feeding this year. You can see we've got kind of our semi-permanent paddock set up. And then we bale graze. The way I do it is we set it up on kind of a weekly basis. Trying to, basically just run the tractor more or less once a week. And we'll alternate between a day of bales and a day of corn, and then just feed basically just the right amounts of corn so that they're not overeating it, and also doing a reasonable job cleaning it up. And then that way we can also utilize the bale grazing to improve our land there, the fertility and things like that. It's kind of, we just had a snowfall, so you can't really see a lot of, in this picture here, you can't see a lot of the previous spots there, but it kind of gives you an idea of how it's set up. Then just our water system that we run year round. We do so around mid-February here, so coming up shortly, we'll pull our cows, take them all home, and we'll feed them on just a bed pack, and we'll move to strictly bale feeding through the calving season, just so we have them close to home, and so they're easier to watch and take care of in that way. So and then through the summer, primarily we do rotational grazing as best we can. Some of you probably know the pasture map app, and that's what we use to manage. Obviously, this gets modified every year depending on which acres we're cash cropping and which are being used for grazing and things like that. But that's kind of one of the things we've been doing to help try to reduce our cost of production and improve our land. It's a lot of land in our area here, a good portion of it is still heavily wooded, and so there's a lot of clearing involved and just kind of starting from the ground up, cleaning it up, and so we feel that using our cattle are in a way a tool that we can use to utilize the land we have before it's croppable, but at the same time rotating them through the croppable acres as well to maintain and improve the fertility. So I don't know, that's kind of all I got here. So
Okay, thanks, Mika. That was great. So now we're going to move into just a bit of a panel discussion here. So I don't know if Mike and Carl, if you want to unmic at least. I know Carl's having some video issues, but if you want to turn your cameras on, and then we'll just proceed into a bit of a panel discussion here first. So I'll just ask a few questions of each of you, and we'll do a bit of a round table with you and you can get your answers. So the first one here, notwithstanding the fact that OMAFRA staff were hounding you to participate in this network, what interested you to join the network? Mika, do you want to start us off?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So being being a newer beef producer in a way, and just starting where we were with having to improve a lot of our land. Obviously, I realized our cost of production was really high, and I thought this would give me a good opportunity to really sit down and figure out, see where our numbers are at and where we can improve. One of the things was, I think it helped me separate the passion for farming from the reality of farming. Not to say I'm less passionate about it, but it just made me realize a lot, like that it has to make money, right? And I can't do it just for the sake of beef farming, at least the stage of life I'm at right now. And obviously there's great networking opportunities as well, and just the information that came out of it. I feel like a lot of times I'm just a big copycat, and so there's all these different ideas floating around, and so there's a lot of new things to try, and then also just help gain perspective on different strategies that work in different regions and how we can tweak them to work in our area here.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. So Carl, do you want to let us know what
being a graduate of Guelph, I'm always interested in furthering my knowledge of what's going on. I know I'm getting on the end of my activity as farming. I've been at it for 50 years now on my own, and so. But anyway, but also we're a bit unique here in the sense we're close to town, and it's not practical for us to graze because of the way our farm is cut up, and that we have a whole lot of little small fields and stuff like that for grazing, and I'm not a fence maker in the first place, but and I think I'd like to share the information of how we can be profitable with dry lotting through different things that we have done, and also I enjoyed the previous seminar back a couple of years ago where we learned a whole lot of things, and I'm here to keep learning, and that's why I was available, and I hope I can bring some information what we do.
Perfect. Yeah. So Mike, you want to?
Yeah, I guess I echo kind of all of those, and I guess I was interested in see if I could learn to get some new ideas and figure out some different ways to do things, because we always need to be ready to pivot and change as conditions change, and it's always good to take a good deep look at the way other people are doing things and hopefully steal some good ideas.
Yeah, and I know within OMACRO we talk about that as R&D, rob and duplicate, right? So you just and it is
Yeah.
good from that perspective. You get a national perspective. I mean, yes, there's the Ontario farms, but there's lots of other different farms across the country that you might be able to take some little nuggets out of there. So so that's great. Thanks for that. So so how do you use cost of production data on your operation? So Carl, do you want to lead us off on that one?
Well, we like again, we're fairly unique here, and we're dry lotting. But once a year, I sit down with my son, whose farm's kind of with me, and on the cow side of it, and we kind of assess where we're going and what costs we are, and how we can maybe cheapen what we're doing or cut costs someplace along the line. Not cheapen what we're doing, but cut costs. And we have a rough idea what other people are doing from cost of production analysis, and it's just trying to keep up with it, and like you say, rob from Peter to try and help pay Paul.
All right. Yeah, Mika, do you have
Yeah,
ideas there?
yeah, for sure. So we're in a higher cost of production bracket, and realizing that, and so you seeing that data kind of give me a realistic goal of what to target for a good cost of production. Understanding that we're in a building phase, but at the same time, just knowing that this is a number I should work towards, and then hopefully beyond that eventually.
Sure, perfect. Yeah. So Mike, you
Yeah, so, and I guess my outlook on cost of production, it helped me to drill down a little bit further, because I was always on like the feed kick. So let's find the cheapest feed we can feed and make that work. And I needed to and I guess this kind of gave me an idea to drill down and have a look at what goes into total feed costs. So it's not just the ingredient, but it's also the spoilage you get, the machinery you need to move it, the storage you need, and all those things added together to get the feed from point A to point B really started to add up if you weren't careful. So you start looking at, okay, I'm going to feed corn stalks, but in order to make that work in my mixer, I need to chop it first. So I've got some extra fuel involved. So how much does that cost me by the time I get that ingredient into the feed bunk? So that whole addition of everything that went into that feeding system added up. So it was good to get an idea of where all that ended up at.
Yeah, I know I've been part of quite a number of livestock cost of production or benchmarking studies, and it always comes out that feed's a big one. Everybody knows feed's a big factor, but there's always a huge range in what the feed costs are on a per unit basis. So people are just managing it differently and just learning that piece of it. So yeah, so I am mindful of some of that. I think I might might go to sort of one of the last questions on here, and then I'll go to some of the producer questions that I'm getting in the chat here. I just want to make sure we get to those as well. And then if we have time, we'll loop back to some of the other panel questions here. But so have you, or are you considering making changes as a result of any of the network information that you've had? So Mike, have you?
I guess I'm always making changes because I always got to be ready to pivot and change as things look at. So some of the changes that we've made just in the last few years is we've really taken a look at our calving window. So we're really tightening that up. We want to get that down into 60 days if we can. So we're taking a serious look at that. We're doing earlier preg checking. So we're running the cows through, we're preg checking them earlier so that we can get those freeloaders out. The other thing we're doing at preg checking is doing body condition scoring so that we've got a good idea of where our herds are and what we need to do to either bring some weight, put some weight on them, or maintain weight to keep a good handle on where we are so that we come into calving at the right condition. Our culling program's gotten really strict, and our cull pen. So we've got to the point now where as we're calving, if we decide this is the last time for this cow, or the cow has an attitude or something, some reason, it goes into a physical cull pen, and that's a one-way trip. So as soon as that calves wean, that cow's on the truck and she's gone to her forever home. So we don't have to deal with her anymore. And the other thing that we've changed is we've taken a serious look at the byproducts that we were feeding, trying to get the true cost of that. So a lot of times we can get a bunch of these byproducts delivered for nothing or next to nothing. But when you start to add in the extra costs, so if you got some hardware issues, so a cow eats a piece of steel and it drops dead on you, that's a definite expense that you need to add to your cost of feed. So there's a lot of those other things, other costs that we were looking at in the byproduct area, and also the longevity of the cows. If we're on a strict carrot diet, for example, we're seeing that our cows aren't able to stay in the herd quite as long. We're burning some livers. We're doing some other things with being on some really weird feeds that in the long term, it's not the best for our situation. So we've taken all that into consideration and made some changes based on what we were seeing there.
Okay, so Amika, do you have some things that you've been considering changing or changes you've made as a result of some of the information?
Yeah, I mean, there's always some change, like we're always changing things too. One of the things that came to mind was even just our vaccination protocols, obviously in conversation with our vet. But for example, 1 year we were vaccinating everything for foot rot, and then when we did notice a huge difference, we decided to take that one out again just because of the cost of it and the extra work with it as well. And then also, yeah, like we're always trying to bring our calving window tighter as well, just because time is also a resource for us, which is sometimes in short supply. So the tighter we can get our calving window, the less time we have to spend checking for, so things like that. So definitely, yeah, there's always things that are on our radar that we're trying to improve and change. The efficiency of our grazing system, right? Some of our pastures were kind of spread out by a couple of kilometers as well. So try to plan things out in such a way that our movements are minimal when possible.
Okay, and lastly, Carl, have you made any change or considering changes as a result?
Yeah, we're considering a couple changes. One is that I know it flies in the face of cost of production, but we're thinking seriously about starting to TMR all our feed for the cows. We have cows coming, like people buying cows, and so we're bringing in young cattle, and they're timid. The old cows boss them away from the good feed, and so we TMR also the mineral. Then I'm not sure that all the cows are getting the appropriate amount of mineral. So we have the TMR here for the grower barn, and we're thinking about doing that. The other thing we're really considering, because we do keep some cattle back for bulls, and we're thinking about maybe starting to finish our own calves. Just another revenue stream, instead of cash cropping, try and put more feed through our own livestock. So, but the TMR is the big one that we're looking at right now.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so I think I'm going to go to our chat here and pick out some of the questions here, and some of them I'll direct to some of them, but other ones I'll open it up to everyone. And this one I'll open up to everyone. What characteristics do you breed for? Size, condition, calving? Carl, do you want to start us off there?
Calving is a big thing. There's nothing I like more than in the middle of wintertime with my arm up to my shoulders in the cow trying to pull a calf. That's one thing I like, and so we try and look for bulls that drop small calves. And the other is that we did introduce a double muscle bull in the herd, just to see if we can get a little bit more growth on the back end of our heifers. We were getting them with maybe just slim down a little bit. So that's the main thing that we're looking at, like calving and maybe a larger rump on them.
Okay, and Mika, do you have what you breed for?
Yeah, so initially our cows, the first cows that I bought and started with, they were some big Herefords, and what I realized pretty quickly was some of the rugged pasture I was putting them through was pretty hard on them, and so just the cost of caring for them was getting pretty high, and so what we've been trying to breed for a moderate sized cow the last few years now, and that's been quite successful, bringing our cow size down somewhat. Now we're going to have been transitioning into breeding more for the performance of the calves as well. So, but definitely, and like mentioned, calving ease is a big one for us just because of the time constraints as well. That's just a big thing for us. Yeah.
Okay, Mike, do you want to finish that one?
Yeah, we don't retain any heifers for breeding. So ours are terminal crosses. So we're looking for calving ease first and foremost. And then we're looking for some carcass attributes. So we're looking for good growth, and we're looking for good marbling, and anything we can do to make the best carcass we can, because we need, for our retail store, we need the premium carcasses to go in there. And for our value chain, we also want really, really good end products. So that's where we target.
Okay, thanks. And this next one I'll direct right to you, Mika, just so that we can move on to some other questions here. So how do winter grazers know their cows are getting enough? You had said, just the right amount, but how do you know?
Just by, I mean, I'm not schooled in that sense, but definitely just by looking at my cows and the body condition, and then often when I have other beef farmers visiting, because I don't know what you call it, their tunnel vision kind of, right, where you get used to seeing your own cattle, having another guy look at them, like, how do they look, right? And typically I would say we're probably erring on the side of overfeeding them sometimes. So that's for us, yeah, just basically keeping an eye on them and making sure their body condition is keeping up.
Okay, thanks. Yep. Yeah, here's a predator question. So Carl, dry allotted because of coyotes. Mike and Mika, do you have predator troubles being outside, especially in winter, so much? So Mike, you want to start?
Yeah, so all the dumb coyotes in our area are dead. The rest of them are very active. So we'll generally lose 1 or 2 calves a year to coyotes. We try to keep a rifle handy all the time at calving time. Our cows are pretty good at being protective. We do call if they get really too aggressive towards us, but they're used to being cows are used to run outside, so they're pretty good at protecting the calves. But every once in a while, especially with twins, we do run into some trouble. But yeah, we do have predators, and we try to keep them shot. We're also really close to town, so it makes it you have to be really careful with your firearms.
Sure, yeah. Mika, yeah.
We don't have any issues, and I don't know why, because I know there's some producers close by to us that have serious issues with predators, wolves and coyotes and such. We had a bear hanging out in our cornfield through the winter here. My neighbor caught on his trail cam, but so far, been really thankful we haven't had issues. So yeah.
Well, that's good. So, so the next question here would be to each of you. So with each year, the probability of a traditional winter growing smaller, any thoughts from each of you how other producers can pivot their winter management and housing? So Carl, do you have a idea on that one?
Well, like I go back to my dad's day of farming, and he let the cattle out to pasture, and if the fields were wet and he had them all punched up, that really cut down the yield, and that's what drove me to trying to manage it that way. So with the winter, like with the amount of rain we got right now, things would be sloppy around our place here because of the yes, we got hills, but we also have hollows in, and the hollows get very soft in this kind of weather. So yeah, it's not like the traditional winters. So you know, and another thing about winter grazing, a lot of our corn stalks are not close to home, so it would be a problem maintaining or looking after the cattle.
Okay, and Mika, did you want to weigh in on that?
Well, I mean, I guess I'm not entirely following the question with as far as yeah, a traditional winter, like a shorter winter for us is almost a good thing. Yeah, they can get pretty cold and harsh up here. So yeah, I'm trying to think here. I don't have any probably valuable insight in that sense right now.
Okay, well, that's fine. So Mike, do you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, we're looking at we do use a TMR, and the cows that are winter grazing have access to feed bunks. So we're looking at when it's really wet and muddy that we're actually locking them up. They come up to eat, and we're actually locking them off for a bit when it's really wet, especially on our neighbors' fields. Our own fields, we can keep them off the clay whenever it's wet, but the sandy ground we seem to be able to get along pretty good just letting them out. We try to give them as much area as possible. So at one point we tried rotational grazing, winter grazing, but we found by concentrating a large number of cattle on a small piece, we were doing too much damage. So we'll give them 100-acre paddocks, and that seems to work better. They don't seem to punch it up quite as much. We do get some damage that we need to fix in the spring, but we're able to lock them off the really heavy ground. The sand's not so bad.
Okay, thanks. So we do have a couple more questions here, and I know we're at the 9 o'clock mark, but if you just hang in with us, and of course, if you need to leave, you need to leave, but we'll just try to address the last couple of questions here. And Mike, we'll continue on with you. This next question is directed at you. Mike, when you say you check the condition of the cow at the time of preg checking, how much condition are you looking for? Are you wanting something fleshy that can potentially go longer on limited feed, or something leaner that could have less issues at calving time on pasture?
Yeah, so what we're looking for is about a 5, and we have the vet do the condition, just because, like Mika said, it's hard to look at your own cattle and say where they're at. So we have that kind of outside eye of the vet to call condition. And then what we'll do is when we run them through, we have a way to pull the thinner ones out. So we'll put them in a separate pen that we can feed them a little better feed. Actually, our growing ration for a bit to get them a little more weight on them. We want to make sure, like I like that 5, because then they can go out on the corn stalks or whatever, and we're not worried that they're going to lose a whole lot of condition. We've come the full circle of where we thought they're dry cows, we don't have to feed them, we don't have to look after them, but we're starting to realize that we can't take any shortcuts at any time in that gestation period. So So yeah, a dry cow may not need as much, but we got to make sure that she's getting at least what she needs to maintain and grow that calf properly so that we don't have any issues at calving time.
Okay, thanks. And the last question I have here is to Mike and Mika. Are your milder winters having any negative effects on your crop yields from soil damage due to cattle wintering on fields without frost? So Mika, you want to start us off?
Not so far, I'd say, because we still do get, we still have frost in the ground right now. I mean, we've had a pretty mild week here and frost is leaving in some places. But typically we will still have a good frost throughout the majority of the winter. This would have been the first year where it was really, really late setting in. And so definitely there was a lot of pugging and things going on there. So in that case, we didn't keep the cows on our crop fields. We kept them out in the pasture paddocks and try to keep them on higher ground. So yeah.
Okay, and Mike?
So the thing about soil damage is we did, when we first started running cows outside, we did a lot of studies and measuring compaction and all kinds of stuff. We found out that the tractor that drove out to the field to put the round bale in the feeder did actually way more damage than the cows ever did. Part of my philosophy is we make sure the cows aren't actually walking on the soil. So we make sure we've got enough cover crop, enough crop residue so that the cows are walking on that instead of on the bare ground. And I think the milder winters are actually helping our cover crops grow better. So we've got more root mass, we've got more top, and that's actually working to our benefit to protect the soil from any damage that the cows might do to it.
Okay, thanks. So I think we'll leave the questions at that. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank both Brenna for coming along and presenting, and our producers, Carl, Meek, and Mike coming out, and thank you for participating in the network for one thing, and thank you for participating in this panel. So